Right, so the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, has long been touted, and indeed they've said as much themselves, that they are the most moral army in the world. A claim that gets repeated ad nauseam by Israeli officials and their supporters, despite all the atrocity we've seen them commit and continue to commit in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, as things stand in this moment in time. But in another blow to their nonsense claims of morality, turns out they're also just a bunch of petty thieves, but on a scale you wouldn't believe. Revelations of systematic looting by Israeli soldiers in Gaza, Lebanon and Syria in particular have shown that far from being a beacon of morality, the IDF has been implicated in widespread theft, with soldiers brazenly stealing cash, gold and other valuables from civilian homes and businesses. These actions, often carried out under the guise of military operations, have revealed a culture of impunity and entitlement within the IDF. So much so that the existence of a so-called loot unit has now been exposed from within the IDF, and has therefore rendered the hypocrisy of Israel's moral posturing as even more of a sick joke than it was previously. Brazen thefts, the complicity of commanders, all adding to the devastating impact on affected communities that this will have. Any semblance of belief in the IDF's moral superiority should now be well and truly consigned to the dustbin. An army of crooks is all that Israel has. Right, so the IDF's looting operations that have suddenly come into focus. Actually, an expose that was touched upon last year in a piece by Israeli magazine Plus 972, and now in another expose by Israel's own Ynet news service, demonstrating the organisation of this thievery, showing that it's Israel's own media shining a light on their own army's criminality, and it's all going woefully ignored by global mainstream media as per usual. This is not the work of rogue soldiers acting alone either, as you might figure, but are instead part of a systematic and organised effort within the IDF, involving significant organisation and up the chain of command at that. The most recent reports have revealed the existence of this specialised unit within the IDF, referred to as the loot unit, whose primary function is to seize valuables during military operations. Soldiers with swag bags, if you will. This unit operates under the direct supervision of senior commanders who are turning a blind eye to the theft, or in some cases actually actively encourage it. The loot unit's activities have not been limited to Gaza either. They have also been documented in Lebanon and in Syria, where Israeli forces have continued to conduct raids and airstrikes even during times of ceasefire. The loot unit's modus operandi has been disturbingly efficient as well. During military operations, soldiers are tasked with searching civilian homes and businesses for weapons or other contraband. However, instead of focusing on these security concerns, many soldiers use this opportunity to steal cash, jewellery, electronics and other valuables. In some cases, soldiers have even dismantled entire homes, stripping them of doors, windows and electrical wiring. The stolen goods are then transported back to Israel, where they are either sold or kept as personal trophies. And the scale of the looting is staggering. In Gaza, Israeli soldiers have been accused of stealing millions of dollars worth of cash, gold and other valuables from Palestinian homes and businesses. During the genocide in Gaza, reports emerged of soldiers breaking into banks, jewellery stores and private residences, often under the pretext of searching for weapons, and in one particularly egregious case, soldiers were caught on camera loading bags of cash and gold bars onto military vehicles. The cash, gold and other valuables are then transferred in secured vehicles to the Israeli army's main cash desk station in Tel Aviv, before then being deposited in the Bank of Israel. The Israeli army has even supplied the loot unit with bank machines to count the mountains of cash they've been seizing, and scales for weighing the gold. During one alleged raid on a Hezbollah stronghold in southern Lebanon, soldiers reportedly stole cash, gold and other valuables from civilian homes. The thefts were so brazen that some soldiers posted photos of their loot on social media, boasting about their exploits. Similarly, in Syria, Israeli forces seized all manner of weaponry to add to their own stocks or potentially sell elsewhere. For instance, weapons that were captured in Lebanon have been sent to Ukraine to use in their war against Russia. One notable example of reported loot unit thievery came from Palestinian singer Hamada Nasrallah, who was shocked to discover a TikTok of a soldier playing the guitar that his father had bought him 15 years earlier. Other videos uploaded to social media in recent months show Israeli soldiers boasting about finding wristwatches, unboxing someone's collection of soccer shirts, and stealing rugs, groceries and jewellery. Looting is not an isolated incident. It is the norm, it would appear, in the supposedly most moral army, and isn't actually anything new. For instance, it was documented all the way back in the 1967 Six-Day War that Israeli soldiers were accused of looting Palestinian homes and businesses in the West Bank and in Gaza. And similarly, during the 1982 invasion of Lebanon, soldiers were accused of stealing cash, gold and other valuables then as well. The complicity of IDF commanders is a key factor, though, in the persistence of looting within the IDF here. And now, though, in some cases, senior officers have been directly involved in the theft, using their authority to cover up the crimes or to ensure that the stolen goods are safely transported back to Israel. In other cases, commanders have simply chosen to ignore the thieving, viewing it as a minor infraction compared to the broader goals of the military operation. This culture of impunity has allowed looting to flourish within the IDF, the soldiers feeling confident that they will not face consequences for their actions. Without that cover, the scale of the theft would not have been possible. An excerpt detailing the numbers coming from Press TV, stating that the regime has so far stolen around $28 million in cash from Gaza and Lebanon. The looting also includes the seizure of 180,000 items of weaponry, including anti-aircraft missiles, drones, advanced anti-tank missiles of various ranges, thousands of explosive charges, standard rifles, sniper rifles, military radios, compasses, binoculars, night vision devices, uniforms, shoes, dozens of vehicles, and even collector's treasures such as French rifles from the 1930s and rare valuable pistols used by Hezbollah resistance fighters. The Zionist forces did not stop at Gaza and Lebanon, but also found their way to Syria after the fall of Bashar al-Assad in December. They took several T-55 tanks, anti-tank missiles, large Schwarz charges, Kalashnikov rifles, and considerable amounts of ammunition. The looting committed by Israeli forces has had a devastating impact on those affected communities, on top of what they've already had to live through. In Gaza, where the economy has been crippled by years of blockade and military operations, especially in recent months, the theft of cash and valuables being seized by their occupiers and oppressors to use against them is particularly gut-wrenching. For many Palestinians, the stolen items represent their life savings, functionally all that might be left of their lives, devastated by the genocide meted out upon them, items with long-standing family history accumulated over many years. The loss of these valuables, therefore, isn't just an impoverishment, but a destruction of their familial and cultural identities as well. The revelations of widespread looting by Israeli forces adds just yet more fuel to the fire that the IDF's self-titled most moral army in the world claim is, and always has been, a hollow slogan designed to whitewash Israeli actions. Far from being a beacon of morality, the IDF is symbolic of depravity and unchecked impunity, and has now been implicated in systemic theft on top of all of the destruction and carnage they have meted out against civilian populations. The looting committed by Israeli soldiers is not an isolated incident either. It is a pattern of broader abuse and impunity that has characterized Israeli military operations for decades. The IDF's moral posturing is particularly galling given the stark contrast between its rhetoric and its actions. While Israeli officials frequently invoke the language of morality and ethics to justify their actions, the reality on the ground, as we're seeing here, is the total opposite. The looting committed by Israeli forces is a reminder that the IDF is not a moral army. It is an occupying force that has consistently prioritized its own interests over the rights and dignity of all of those living around them and under their control. The looting committed by Israeli forces in Gaza, Lebanon and Syria in recent months, though, must be seen for what it is, a sign of the hypocrisy and the brutality that underpin all of Israel's military operations. Far from being the most moral army in the world, the IDF has been implicated in systemic theft and abuse, with soldiers brazenly stealing cash, gold and valuables from civilian sources. The existence of a literal loot unit within the IDF, the brazenness of the thefts, and the complicity of commanders all point to a culture of exemption and entitlement, never held to account for any of their crimes. As observers of all of this, having watched this and now being aware of an issue going grossly unreported in our media, though, we all now have a responsibility to challenge the myth of this moral superiority the IDF claim to have. We have yet more evidence on top of the genocide they've been committing about just how immoral and corrupt they are, and on top of their genocidal tendencies, and it is yet one more crime for which Israel must be held accountable for in its actions and gain justice for their victims. Theft is not a victimless crime in a war zone, any more than it is anywhere else and at any other time. For all the war we're looking at with Israel and the perpetrators here, though, from Gaza to the West Bank to Lebanon and Syria, and potential conflict on the horizon with Egypt as well, you'd think starting another war somewhere else would be ridiculous for Israel at this point. But with Netanyahu seemingly seeing this as his only way to stay in power, of course he's going to start another one if he can. But by putting Iran now in his sights, the risk of escalation to a much wider war increases significantly. However, Iran, well, they've had plenty to say about that. Check out the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe before you do so, though, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content as well. It's helping to support the channel at the same time as that does, which is enormously appreciated. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.